Welcome. This video tells the story of a 100-mile hike on the Appalachian Trail from Boiling Springs, Pennsylvania to Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. I'm Mike Brown from Stevensville, Michigan, and I hiked with my brother-in-law, Doug Scales from Guilford, Connecticut. We met on Tuesday, September 22, 2015 in Boiling Springs, Pennsylvania, and stayed at the Allenberry Resort where they had a hiker special for their rooms. The town of Boiling Springs is beautiful, and in addition to their quaint business district, they have a children's lake where ducks and geese share the water with roving schools of trout. There is an Appalachian Trail trailhead at the site of a colonial ironworks. On Wednesday, September 23rd, we parked our vehicles at the ironworks trailhead. Full of excitement and carrying 50 to 60 pound backpacks, we took our first steps southbound across an idyllic footbridge. Those first couple miles are mostly flat and run alongside farm fields. Nonetheless, we found ourselves stopping every 15 minutes or so to catch our breath. Undaunted, we pressed on. As we exited the farm field area, the trail quickly became rocky and varied in elevation. Before long, we stopped at the Center Point Knob, where a monument commemorates the historical center point of the AT, which stretches from northern Georgia to Maine. We took a blue-blazed side trail that promised white rock views in 4/10 of a mile. We certainly found an abundance of white rocks, but not the promised views. After about an hour, we ditched our packs and walked a little further, only to find the elevation descending. We doubled back and had lunch at our packs. As we retraced our steps to the AT, Doug spotted a large up arrow painted on a rock that we had walked past. We scrambled up the rocks at the arrow and found the promised views. Soon we rejoined the AT going southbound. As we walked, we kept checking the time and our progress relative to the landmarks in our trail guides. And I can't thank David A. Miller enough for the guide he has assembled and maintained. Struggling under our heavy packs over the rocky terrain, we were not making the miles per hour that either of us were expecting from our practice hikes at home. We joked that the AT miles were longer than the miles back home. The sun was beginning to set behind mountain tops when we came across the road. There, a couple was returning to their pickup truck with their dog. We asked them for a hitch, and they gladly took us to Deer Run Campground, our planned stop for the night. We set up our tents and ate our evening meal. I announced that I had to lighten my pack before starting out in the morning. I threw out a full package of tortillas, a full jar of peanut butter, a full container of honey, and a 10-foot by 12-foot tarp. We settled in for the night. On Thursday, September 24th, we left the campground and started our 11.1-mile trek to the Iron Master's Mansion Hostel at Pine Grove Furnace State Park. Although my pack was noticeably lighter, it was still punishing. Instead of stopping every 15 minutes to catch my breath, I was stopping every 20 minutes. Better, but not making our projected pace of 2 miles per hour. Late in the day, I announced that I was going to ditch my camp stool next morning to further reduce weight. As we were nearing Pine Grove Furnace State Park, we came upon a campsite and a fire ring. I decided it didn't make sense to carry the chair any further, so I set it up next to the fire ring. Doug was inspired and ditched his stool too. Although I guess in a technical sense we were littering, we tried to do it with a certain amount of feng shui. With darkness falling, we put on our headlamps and covered the remaining miles to the Iron Master's Mansion Hostel. We took advantage of their offering of hot pizza for supper and talked about our adventure. We decided the trail was more punishing than we anticipated, and our having fun level was not as we would have liked. We decided to call for a shuttle in the morning. We gathered our things Friday morning and got the shuttle ride back to Boiling Springs. There we loaded our equipment into my Dodge Grand Caravan. Gotta like those stow-and-go seats. We decided to drive to Caledonia State Park, which is just off the AT. There we reserved a campsite for 2 days. We spent the rest of the day hiking the many trails in the park without our heavy packs. That seemed to be the right solution for a couple guys in their 60s. Our having fun meter was well up from previous levels. It seemed a bit strange on Saturday morning to leave our tents set up for a second day in a row. The previous evening we had studied our maps in view of now having my van available for transportation. We decided to spend the day at Gettysburg, which is just the short jaunt down US 30. Doug and I enjoyed visiting the exhibits and taking the driving tours of the battlefield. We walked the many tour paths and talked to many people. A bit of a contrast to the isolation you sometimes feel walking the green tunnel of the AT. We ended the day returning to our campsite at Caledonia State Park. On Sunday morning, we broke camp and loaded our things into my van. We then drove to the Penmar County Park, which, as you might guess, sits on the border between Pennsylvania and Maryland. We hiked south on the AT to the High Rock Loop Trail. Atop these rock formations, we could see for miles over the sprawling terrain. Next, we returned to Penmar Park, where we were invited to join a musical gathering of the locals. We chatted with a number of people who were eager to learn about our hike on the Appalachian Trail. We then hiked north from the park a short ways until we found the Mason-Dixon line marker. Doug thought it might be fun to take a second photo where we were debating which direction to go. When we returned to the parking area, we were surprised and delighted to find a 1915 steam tractor being unloaded. It was fun to watch the owner unload the tractor, then drive it down the road to his home. After checking our maps, we decided to find a tent site at Catoctin Mountain Park, which is the home of Presidential Camp David. On Monday, we decided to explore the many hiking trails, some with waterfalls, others with lakes, at Catoctin Mountain. During our lunch break at the park's visitor center, one of the visitors wanted to have a picture taken with a hiker, so I made the best of the situation. After lunch, we hiked more of the trails alongside lakes, over rocks and logs, and took in the view from the base of a waterfall.
There you go.
Next, we hiked a rock scramble, which led us to the Chimney Rock Formation. There we enjoyed magnificent views, but were also a bit concerned about other hikers who would jump from rock to rock in spite of vertical drops of 100 feet or more. When we got back to our tent site, I took a photo on the inside of our van with the hiking equipment and twine I had strung to dry our towels and washcloths. On Tuesday, we decided to split our day, the morning on the AT and the afternoon at the Antietam battlefields. In the morning, we were heading to Washington Monument Park when we spotted an AT crossing of Interstate Highway I-70. We parked and walked across the noisy highway. After checking out the interstate highway, we continued south in Maryland. Our destination was the Washington Monument State Park. We dressed for the hike to the monument as the day had become consumed by a driving, misty rain. The entrance to the stone monument was closed as a lightning strike necessitated an engineering assessment of structural safety. We were driving south to leave the park when I had to stop the van to allow a flock of at least 50 wild turkeys to cross the road in front of us. They dashed across a few at a time, as seen here. Next, we set our navigation for Sharpsburg, Maryland, and the Antietam battlefields. The layout was similar to Gettysburg in that they had a visitor center, driving tours, and hiking trails. It was an interesting visit with far less crowds than Gettysburg. In this last picture of the Antietam Creek Bridge, I thought it was interesting that the tree on the left side of the bridge was there during the Civil War. Quite a survivor. On Wednesday, September 30th, we arrived at the southern point of our journey, Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. We parked at the visitor center and took the free shuttle bus to downtown. Harpers Ferry sits at the convergence of the Potomac and Susquehanna rivers. The city has a rich history that spans hundreds of years. We started by touring the lower town district and seeing the many exhibits. Next, we found the AT and followed it north along the C&O Canal towpath. We were spellbound by all the water birds out in the Potomac that day. We were even treated to bald eagles flying overhead. We went as far as Highway 340 Bridge and paused to take a break. After our break, we reversed course and followed the AT back to town in the Jefferson Rock Formation. It is said that Thomas Jefferson stood here on October 25, 1783, and looked down upon the junction of the Potomac and Susquehanna. He found the view from the rock impressive and said that this scene is worth a voyage across the Atlantic. From Jefferson Rock, we continued southbound on the AT until we saw the turnoff for the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. There we chatted with staff as well as fellow hikers, and of course got our pictures taken at the sign on the front of the building. After a hearty lunch, we returned to the van at the visitor center and drove a short distance to an AT trailhead for an afternoon hike south across the Shenandoah River.
Pleasant near the water.
Yeah. We were
Race cars.
walking across the Shenandoah River.
Doug posed for a photo before we planned to double back to the van. He slipped on the rain-soaked leaves and rocks and fell. Fortunately, he suffered only minor injuries. In spite of all its beauty, the Appalachian Trail can be a very dangerous place. We selected a campsite on the banks of the Potomac. Picturesque, but there was also a busy railroad just behind us. Good enough for one night. On Thursday, October 1st, we began our drive back to Boiling Springs, Pennsylvania. We adjusted our navigation to take us to Crystal Grotto's caves near Boonesboro, Maryland. There we had a most enjoyable tour of their cave system. We especially appreciated how close we could get to the many crystalline formations. Back in the van, we continued to head northeast back to Boiling Springs, Pennsylvania. Once there, we went for one last 6-mile hike in a light drizzle. We concluded our adventure with a delicious meal at the Boiling Springs Tavern, the same place we shared our first meal together. After a good night's rest at the Ellenberry Resort, we woke on Friday for the long drive home. For Doug, it was Guilford, Connecticut. For me, it was Stevensville, Michigan. This brings us to the end of our adventure and perhaps a few reflections. So, did we accomplish our objectives? We did not hike a 100-mile straight line from Boiling Springs, Pennsylvania to Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, carrying full backpacks. Nope, only the first 20 miles were done that way. For the rest, we added our van, which eased our pack load and expanded our horizons. Rather than being confined solely to the AT, we also explored state parks, national parks, Civil War battlefields, and the cave system. We took advantage of restaurants and stores as we felt like it. We may have strayed from our original hiking plan, but we had a wonderful time. In the final analysis, the hiking plan was only a means to accomplish our main objective, having a good time. Mission accomplished. As for me, whether hiking alone or in groups, the Appalachian Trail will always be an influence in my life. In addition to the hiking, I enjoy the planning and preparations. I enjoy the conditioning and training. I enjoy checking out my equipment and camping out on our 20-acre farm. At the end of each AT hike, I pause, take a deep breath, I smile, and then I always hunger and thirst to return.